Hello there. Hello, wonderful people at the internet. Today we're going to be doing a book tag, and the Game of the book tag that we're doing is the Game of Thrones book tag, and I chose this one because the other day I went down to the high street near where I live, where all the shops are, and I grabbed these bad boys from Oxfam. So, thought we'll do one about Game of Thrones. So I actually have read the first Game of Thrones. I read it when I was in year 6 of school, so I must have been around 9 or 10. And for those who are familiar with Game of Thrones will know that that's probably not the best time to read Game of Thrones. So, I mean, it didn't bother me at all, its content. I was more interested with the story and how good George R.R. Martin was at writing. He's really good at immersing you, from what I remember. So I was more like, wow, this is so cool, and I want to read more of the story than I was, oh my god, there's sex. But of course, my mum started talking to people about how I was reading Game of Thrones when they asked what I was reading. And then, because it's really popular, it wasn't long before people started going, he shouldn't have that. So I haven't finished reading it yet. I've got the first book back on my shelf now, and I've now got book 2 and 3, and I will buy a copy of the first book that corresponds with these copies, because these are really nice. I've got a thing for small books. I like how these they don't look smaller, but not in thickness, but in like their size. They're shorter, and I think they're shorter than internet when you're reading it. But I digress. So that's why we're doing a Game of Thrones one. Without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so the first question of the book tag was character who thinks only about revenge, and I'll go and grab the book that I'm using as my example here. I haven't read a lot of books, which is a bit silly really, since I'm doing a book channel, but I've not read a lot of books, and all the books I have read usually series. I'm a really slow reader, and I've not been a reader for very long. And I've had slumps and stuff all the way through. So I've read Harry Potter, I've read Maze Runner, The Hunger Games. And then other than that, as far as series go, I've read Fullmetal Alchemist and this one here. But other than that, no real series at all, and standalones as well. It's kind of limited. So I didn't really realise how little I had read until I started trying to answer these questions with books I'd read, because I was like, I can't actually think of one. I mean, some of the book texts, the questions were your top 3 favourite series, and I was like, well, I've only read about 3, so it was just a bit of an eye-opener, but we're getting there. We're ploughing through slowly broadening the horizons. I wish I had more time to read, because there's a whole load of stuff I'd like to read, but anyway, the character who thinks who's all about revenge, we've got Attack on Titan here, and of course the character for that is Eren Yeager. I won't go into spoilers for any of these books answering the questions, but I mean, this is a pretty minor spoiler. In the first volume of Attack on Titan, Eren's mum is eaten by a Titan, and that's kind of the motivating factor for the rest of the series to get him to act and do the things he's doing. And it does grow and develop as the story goes on, but it's kind of the core of his anger that he feels towards the world that is so... who makes him who he is. So yeah, character is all about revenge. Eren Yeager wanting to get revenge on the Titans and whoever knocks down the walls. Okay, question 2 was so I'm looking down here because I've got my notes down there as usual. I've got book featuring political intrigue, and for that one I chose if it was series I would have said Witcher, but for book I chose Time of Contempt. So The Witcher is the first adult fantasy series if you don't count the one Game of Thrones book I read, which obviously has political intrigue, but I can't remember anything about it. So this is the first adult fantasy book I've read, and so with political intrigue, I don't read many thrillers or things like that, so yeah, this is going to be the one with the only series I have with real political intrigue. And Time of Contempt specifically was a book where in Blood of Elves there was a lot of political stuff going on, but it was quite static. It was all about the calm, and then this is the storm. This is all the I'm pointing down here because I've got Blood of Elves down here, but I'm not even pointing at Blood of Elves. But this is the culmination of all the political moves that were made in Blood of Elves, and like the actions that were associated with them actually happening there's a sequence in the middle of this book which I talk about in my spoiler review of the book, which I did a while ago. But not without spoiling it. There is a sequence in around the middle of the book where all this stuff is happening. It's just all comes crashing down, and it's crazy because all this stuff you've seen set up suddenly culminates, and it's so well done. I'm really excited to do Baptism of Fire, which I'm going to read after I read Frankenstein, which I'm rereading now. And it's not a fun time because you probably know I don't really like Frankenstein, but I'm giving it another go because I felt dumb for not liking it, because so many people like it and respect it as this really important book, and I just didn't like it at all. But that's a whole other thing. Okay, question 3. The villain you love to hate was Misery by Stephen King, which used to be my favourite book. I feel like whenever I read a Stephen King book, apart from Pet Sematary, which I didn't really like at the end, whenever I read a Stephen King book, I come out of it like, this is my favourite book ever. And then it goes downhill and I slowly go off of it. That hasn't happened for Shawshank Redemption yet. I still love that book. It's still arguably my favourite, but rest of them have fallen out of my favour. But if there's one thing that I definitely still love about Misery as much as the first time that I read it, it's the villain, and that's Annie Wilkes, who is the nurse, the retired nurse, or, well, she's not retired, she got kicked out, but she's the nurse that's looking after the main character, Paul Sheldon, after he's in a car crash. And she's just so... She's a scene stealer. She's so captivating because she's like a nice lady, but then at random intervals the skin just gets peeled back and she's evil, really unspeakably evil, and then the patch goes back on again and she's a nice person again, and it's just so it gives you whiplash, and it feels so real and so frightening. She's what made this book for me. Coming out of it, I was like, Annie Wilkes, you know, this book wouldn't be what it was without Annie Wilkes. Question 4 is a coming-of-age story. Now, this was perfect because I've one of my favourite things is a coming-of-age story, and, well, it's not really a coming-of-age story, but characters come of age in the story, so that's my excuse for including this. It's Full Metal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. Now, this is a series I read before starting the channel, which is a big regret of mine because I really like this series. It's the best manga series I've ever read, and I can't talk about it because I've not reread it, and I don't remember the books enough. I've rewatched the anime, but I don't remember the books enough specifically to be able to talk about it properly. But I can talk about it here. Now, the main characters are on the front of this book. You've got this guy, that's Edward, and you've got this guy, that's Alphonse, and they're brothers. And at the start of the book, they're about 11 or 12, I think. They might not be 11 or 12, maybe 13, 14, but they're quite young. And towards the end of the series, they're basically adults. And you see them throughout all these really traumatic events grow up. And not just emotionally, but physically as well. There are moments when you have a character standing next to another one and you realise, oh my god, they've grown. Now this one was kick-ass older character. I'll grab a book. If I could reach the book, I decided on, or I nearly dropped a heavy Funko Pop on my guitar. Oh, that would have been nasty. Careful, easy, there we are. Yeah, I chose Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings. My brain just kind of went, yeah, Gandalf's pretty cool. And then I was like, yeah, I can't think of anyone who's kind of cooler than Gandalf. Like, I did originally have Conan the Barbarian on this spot, but he's not so much cool as funny. And there are other characters I can think of, but they're not as old as Gandalf. Like, I think Gandalf's some sort of angel sort of thing. I said he was an angel in front of a hardcore fantasy fan once, and they said no. But as far as my very minimal understanding of Gandalf goes, I believe he's some sort of angel, kind of celestial being in the form of a human. Correct me if I'm wrong. I want to know what Gandalf is because I haven't read the Lord of the Rings wiki yet to figure it out. But I know it's that sort of deal. But Gandalf is pretty cool. Now he never has like a cool fight scene where he takes everyone down or moments like that. But there's some scenes in Lord of the Rings. And I think I can get into these because this is such an old story that, you know, it's I got a spoiler pass on it now. But it's just in the Two Towers, you know. On the so-and-so day, look to the east at sunrise, and it's just like, okay, and then they're losing the battle at Helm's Deep, and then he comes over the top, This is all my memory of the films, because I have read the books, but I can't remember the books as well, because they all, you know, go together in my brain. But he comes down and he lifts his staff up and the light comes out and it's just like, Rah! You know, that even though he never has these big fighting scenes, he's so cool at times. Like, and when he gets Saruman out of Theoden, I think that's his name, Theoden, yeah, that's another cool scene. He's just got, and when he fends off the dragon with his staff, that's another cool scene. Gandalf is really cool, so yeah, I'd start Gandalf on here. I don't know whether that counts or not, but Gandalf is cool. Oh, actually, I just thought of another one that I forgot to mention. That's really annoying. I'll bring them up. We can have this as a tie between the two characters. Granny Weatherwax from Equal Rights. I've only read Equal Rights in the Witcher series so far, so she's the only that's the only book with her in that I've read. But Granny Weatherwax is a very cool old character. She's this well-to-do traditionalist witch who, you know, she's very stern and she's very stubborn. And she is not afraid to, you know, give people a piece of her mind. And she's kick-ass in a whole other way of just, like, completely obliterating people. Not even with magic, but just with sheer willpower and brain power. So yeah, Granny Weatherwax deserves a mention here. We can tie with Gandalf. Speaking of Discworld, question 5 was books featuring dragons, because this is a Game of Thrones tag. And I was going to talk about Earthsea, but I decided to talk about this instead, because I'm reading Discworld and I haven't read Earthsea yet. Guards, that's a book with dragons in. I haven't read Guards yet, but I do know that there are dragons in this one, and I do know also, I don't know why I'm hitting myself with it, that Guards is arguably the point, well, it's actually quite widely agreed upon, that Guards is the point in the Discworld series where it gets really good, and a lot of people do say that Guards is their favourite Discworld book. So I'm really excited to read this one, and I do know it has dragons in, so I thought I'd mention that one. In fact, there is a cover of this book with a big dragon on the front, and it's really cool, but I don't have that edition, and I can't justify spending money on it to get it. It says the guy who's going to buy another Game of Thrones book. I might buy the dragon edition of this one. If I like the book a lot, I'll buy the one with the dragon on the front. Now, next one's character I grew to love, and this is another character from Fullmetal Alchemist up here. I won't get the books down again. It's Van Hohenheim, who is Ed Now's father, who has been absent through most of their childhood, and rocks up in about the 11th book of the series, I'd say. That's the one with his face on, so I'm going to pin it there. But he rocks up, and he seems really cold at first, you know, really cold and the arsehole that Ed believes him to be. And then throughout the series he becomes more of a major character, and you see whole different sides to him. And by the end of the book I was crying over him, which I don't do often, but one of the few times I've cried reading a book was because of Van Hohenheim. In fact, I think I cried about him twice. I cried about Hohenheim twice, so he definitely grew on me, and he's one of my favourite characters in all the fiction thus far. I mean, a lot of my favourite characters in all the fiction are from movies and TV shows, but I do really like Hohenheim, and he's definitely on that list. This one was my favourite magic system, and I don't feel qualified to answer this question because I've not read a lot of books with really interesting and complex magic systems. Like Lord of the Rings, the magic system is quite vague, in Harry Potter it's quite simple, and vice versa, and the same with Discworld, is quite vague in Discworld. And I do have some Brando Sando books down here, and for the unenlightened, Brando Sando is well known to be one of the, if not the best magic system writer in fantasy at the moment. And so, you know, I should be going, oh yeah, Mistborn got the best magic system I've ever read, but I haven't read Mistborn. So I can't say that as much as I want to say that. So for this one I put Fullmetal Alchemist up here, because in Fullmetal Alchemist they have this thing called alchemy, which is when they can make things out of its components. They can spontaneously create it. If you gave them some leather, some the right amount of metal, and so on, they could, well, they don't, only Ed can do that at the start, but they draw a transmutation circle and then it would turn into a sword, you know, like that sort of thing. And there's a character called Roy Mustang who can who uses friction created from these cloth gloves he wears when he clicks his fingers to ignite a flame and flame throw people, basically. So in Fullmetal Alchemist, it's a really interesting component in the story, because like a hard magic system, which Brandon Sanderson does, it's got these rules that the characters have to comply with to get out of situations, and so it does make the series a lot more interesting. So yeah, that's my answer for that question. Now the final question is characters whose only weapon is their mind, or whose weapon is their mind. You know, they use that as their main asset. And when I heard that, my brain carried on going, Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor Who. And Doctor Who's a TV show. It's got books, but I haven't read any of them, so I couldn't use them. And I was racking around in here for a while. I wanted to go Edward Elric, but I've gone on about Fullmetal Alchemist enough this time. So then I actually thought a bit harder, and this came to mind if I reach off. I was thinking Batman as well, but Batman does use his fist quite a lot, so he doesn't really count. Here I hold in my hands oh, I'm so tired. The complete edition of Death Note. So this has got all 12 volumes of the Death Note manga in this one brick. And for those who don't know, Death Note is about the game of cat and mouse between Light, who is a serial killer, and L, who is a detective, and as they battle their wits out. And originally I was going to say Light, but he possesses the Death Note, which is a notebook that kills anyone whose name is written in there. There are a few other rules, but that's the basic thing. So I decided on L instead, because L isn't strong. He doesn't ever get physically involved in situations. His only asset for trying to hunt down the person killing all these people is his brain. But yeah, he is such an interesting antagonist, and it's weird to call him an antagonist because he's the one in the right here, but he's so great because he challenges Light's main asset, which is his intelligence. And so yeah, definitely for a character whose weapon is their mind, it would have to be L, because that's the reason he's in the story. His brain, his ability to outthink or at least match Light's intelligence. So yeah, L. Okay, so that is the book tag. I'm sorry that I haven't done a book review or spoken about something that I've read recently, but I haven't read anything recently because I've started Frankenstein, and times are slow because it's quite a difficult book to get through because it's quite heavy going, and also because I have less motivation to pick it up because I've got these prejudices against it right now. But I'm pushing through, and I can't make a promise that I'll get it done by next week, but I will get it done sooner rather than later, so that we can talk about that and we can move on to The Witcher and all sorts of books that might be in the future. You know, I've got more Discord to read. I'm looking into getting into, who knows, some fantasy series. I might read Gunmetal of Gods up here. I've got the First Law series over here as well, which I know is meant to be really good. So, you know, voice cracks. So we've got a lot of options in front of us, and we'll see where we go. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.